Did I get you? You thought Halloween was over. No, that's a lie. Even though it's November, I'm still here with a new look. I'm filming this at the last possible second because I decided to wait to film this until after I got my haircut. I can't tell if I like it or not. I was going for lesbian and she gave me Karen, which we can work with, but it wasn't the vibe I was going for, so I put on my single knife earring and I put on my flower button up, and I'm hoping I'm still getting that vibe. But we're not talking about that today. Today we're talking about all the books I read in October, and I'm gonna warn you right now, it was not that good. Like, I read a lot, but it was not the standard I wanted to read. If you're new here, my name is Sarah, and I read a lot of books all the time, but recently I've been struggling. I wouldn't call it a reading slump. It's more of I can't seem to find books I really am attached to. Hopefully that's gonna change this month, but October was definitely a struggle for me, so I didn't stick to my TBR at all, but who's surprised at that? So with that all being said, let's just dive on in. So obviously the first book I'm going to talk about for the month of October is The Fellowship of the Ring. I'm doing the Tolkien Readathon, and every single month for the rest of the year, we're reading one book from this beautiful, amazing series. If you listened to my last wrap-up, you know I wasn't the biggest fan of The Hobbit. Like, it was enjoyable, but it didn't live up to the hype. This definitely lived up to the hype, however. I fell in love with this place. I fell in love with the world, and not so quite the magic, but like the wonder, and it was everything I wanted from The Hobbit in this book. Now, I'm currently reading book 2, The Two Towers. I haven't finished it yet, so my opinions aren't set in stone, but I think definitely book 1 is the reason why everyone has fallen in love with the series so much, is because of how amazing this is. I know it was published as a single book originally and then was kind of like split up into 3, which you can tell by the way that this book just kind of ends and the next one picks up, but like, again, we're not talking about the next book. This alone, though, amazing, 5 stars, I absolutely love it. This is the world where hobbits and magic and like there's a quest and you go to Mordor to destroy this powerful ring that's like epicness and awesomeness. How do you give a summary on The Hobbit, or The Lord of the Rings in this case? I don't feel like you can. But this book is very much the setup. This book is very much the beginning of the wonder before it gets tainted by all this darkness. And again, I fell in love with it. It's just amazing. It is beautiful. I can see why people like have problems with the pacing. Again, I definitely think that's going to pick up more in later books, but right now, really enjoying this. I listened to a lot of audiobooks this month, so the next one I'm going to talk about is the Bonehouse. I DNF'd this, and it's not even for, like, the book's fault. Again, I just wasn't feeling this. This is supposedly a Welsh-inspired zombie story. However, looking at the reviews, like, people from actually, like, Welsh culture, they said it's very bad representation. Like, this person clearly did just a very surface-level search of what is meant to be represented, and then just didn't go into it anymore. I didn't like the relationships. I didn't like the characters. The supposed zombies weren't really that interested to me. Like, overall, I just kind of, like, I wasn't feeling this book, and I just wasn't feeling that spoopy vibe. So I DNF'd it fairly quickly. I didn't really even get halfway through. I was introduced to the characters. I kind of had a general idea of what was going on. Our main character, she and basically her parents are dead, and she and her siblings run this graveyard. They make very little money, however, because the town's custom is to cremate all their dead, because if you don't, you have a chance of being a risen dead. There's also the problem with, like, people, like, the newer generations not believing in the risen dead, despite the fact that, like, literally walking outside in your graveyard. So that's, like, that was one of my main issues. It's, like, the very clear miscommunication and, like, what exactly is going on between the truth and what people believe. And I wasn't feeling it. Overall, I just wasn't feeling it. The next book I have to talk about, I read it. Yeah, I read it, and that's Sleepy Hollow. I gave this book 2 stars, which, if you guys know anything about me, is very rare. Basically, if I feel like something is going to be 3 stars or less, I DNF it. However, the reason why I didn't do this one is because I was at this, like, clinic to do something for my job or whatever, and they told me, like, oh yeah, it's gonna be an hour wait, and I'm like, okay, this book just came in, I'll listen to, like, the first half of it. It turned out to be a, like, 3.5-hour wait. I finished the book in one sitting. I didn't like it. I didn't understand it. I don't get why this is considered a scary book. Sleepy Hollow is the story of the Headless Horseman, and it's like you follow this person who is new in town and trying to uncover what is going on with all the supernatural stuff. And it's supposedly based off of real events, or at very least the character, the Headless Horseman, was someone who had their head blown off by a cannonball. Like, historically that happened, but obviously the local legend kind of spiraled out of control and eventually became the Headless Horseman that we all know today. So this is the origin story for that, and I did not like it. I did not understand it. It was not scary. It was not spoopy. I I don't care about anything that happened. I don't know who was in the book. I don't know really what happened. I read this at one sitting and I hated every second of it. So it was 2 stars. It's not quite a 1, like, because the writing style was pretty good, but like everything else was bad. After that, I'm so excited to say I finally read The Cemetery Boys. So, I gotta talk about this physical copy first. Okay, I annotated it and all, but like, just take off this cover and look at this beautiful, this is like the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, so like, it's embossed and glittery and beautiful. I was just gonna listen to this on audiobook, but then like, I saw that, and I'm like, I have to buy it, because pretty shiny things, you know? I read it, I annotated it, I gave this 4 stars. How do I put this? Overall, I think the reason why this wasn't 5 stars for me was because of the confusing tone. This story is basically a queer love story between a transgender teen who's trying to prove his gender to his family by becoming a brujo. A brujo, which I'm not saying that correctly, is a male Mexican witch who is in charge of basically pushing the souls onto the afterlife. They're like the human Grim Reapers, is the best way to put it. And it's like all the females are the healers. And so he wants to prove that he's a brujo and not a bruja, which, you know, soul versus life, and so he is going to perform this ritual to summon a spirit and free the spirit, and he chooses his cousin who has recently died, and he ends up accidentally summoning the school bully who has also recently died under mysterious circumstances. So the bully's like, you can't let me go on yet, I want to say goodbye to my friends, I don't even really care what happened to my death, I just want to make sure my friends are okay. And so that is the first premise of the story, is like, hey, I want to go make sure my friends are okay. And that's where you establish the relationship between our main character and this ghost. And like slowly, obviously, I mentioned this before, it is a romance. They grow close together, and as the time comes, the Day of the Dead, to release the spirits, something goes down. And that is my main problem with this book, is when that something goes down. It's the major tone shift of when that something goes down. And it goes from this cute love story between a person and the spirit who, like, you know it's not going to work out, but you really hope it does. Like, you're hoping for some way, and then it shifts into like this final epic battle of like, can we do this thing because of like mysterious circumstances or whatever. I'm like, I was liking this, and then I'm very confused of what this is. So overall, I liked it. I love the representation, the amazing. This happens in East LA, which I'm sort of from the LA area. I don't want to say I'm from the city, but I have been around that area. And this place is so vibrant and so beautiful. It is so well portrayed in this book. And also, like, this is building up to the Day of the Dead. And I'm like, this is everything. This is everything. So I loved it. It's just, again, that weird tone shift. So yeah, that's why it's 4 stars, not 5 stars. I just really like it though. Like everything else I really like. Next book I read, I am going to mispronounce this. It is, one sec, I have it written down. Palo, Santiago, and the River of Tears. Okay, I listened to this on audiobook, and the narrator, like, the B and P sounds exactly the same. So, like, the character's nickname is Pow, but I kept hearing Bow every single time they said that, and I'm like, that's not her name, but it sounds to me like it. So, weird audiobook confusion aside, this is a middle grade Rick Riordan Presents, basically about, the crying lady by the river. I don't speak Spanish, don't make me say those words. I am gonna butcher them. So there's this very spoopy legend in Hispanic culture where a woman drowns her own children and is forced to wander the river trying to find them for the rest of eternity, and that is the basis of the story. Our main character is kind of like, she's very scientifically driven. She knows what like is fact and what is fiction, and her mother is very spiritually driven. She believes in all these myths and legends and like the sage burning and stuff, which is a very general term, but you know what I mean. Actually, fun fact, the mother does do a tarot card reading in this, and I distinctly remember the cards, and can I tell you, those were very good cards to pick for the rest of the story. This story, basically, it takes our main character who's very scientifically driven and pushes her into a world of fantasy and some magic. It's not doorway fantasy, it's urban fantasy, because, like, she has to go deal with people disappearing by the river, and she thinks, like, oh, if it's gonna be anything, like, she's very slow to, like, actually accept this happening, but, like, if it's gonna be something, why can't it be La Llorona, the crying river lady? You know what I mean. So, like, I wanted this to be good. This is a Rick Riordan Presents. It is urban, middle grade, like, Hispanic inspired, and it's like, it's awesome, right? Sort of. The pacing was really, really weird in this. Some of the characters I didn't quite get. There was a character who was missing in the beginning, like, that's what I mentioned, like, when people go missing, one of them happens to be this person's friend, and it's just, it felt really weird. She almost felt like that thing everyone is trying to get, like, as a trope in a story or whatever, like, everyone's trying to reach this one object, like, the ring in Lord of the Rings, like, you don't feel the character, you feel the object, and so there was that problem, and then there's also the pacing problem, and I'm like, there's certain areas where the main character spent way too much time at, and I get you're trying to build up the world and build up the setting in as small space as possible, because it is all happening in a relatively small town, but, like, I didn't like it. It felt like she stayed in one area for too long, and then when we were introduced to a new area, it was nothing like what was built up for it, and, like, that was my main issue for it. I did give this book, like, 3.5, 4 stars, so I'm like, it was good. It was okay. But at the same time, I'm like, there were spots I definitely feel like you could cut a good, like, 50 pages from. Also, you heard how long it took me to explain that. I feel like there's definitely, like, the synopsis is definitely more trimmed down, but in me explaining it, you kind of can tell what I don't like about it. Like, that alone, I struggle with the synopsis. You know my opinions are slightly negative. Speaking of slightly negative, next book I read and next book I DNF'd is Small Spaces. This is a urban horror book, slightly like, not paranormal. It's paranormal. So our main character is doing a thing or whatever. I DNF'd this so quickly. She and her friends and her school, whatever, are, like, going on a bus field trip. But before that happens, she meets a person who, like, is trying to destroy a book, like, trying to throw it in the river. And our main character takes the book and rescues it. And she realizes, like, while she is going on this field trip, some things in the books are slowly coming to life around her, and something is trying to follow her. And it's like, the warning that the book gives is stay away from large places, always remain in small spaces. So clearly that will not happen, but I DNF'd it before we got there. I was having a reading slump day. I was having a really bad mental health day. I was like, overall, I didn't want to do it, and I wasn't feeling a horror vibe. I wasn't feeling, especially, like, middle grade paranormal. I wasn't doing it, and so I just stopped. I just DNF'd the book. I returned it to my library. I didn't give it a chance. So my opinions on this, I don't have any, because it was entirely me. I just stopped. However, that was not the last book I read this month. The last book I read this month is Norse Mythology, and can I say, I don't think I can rate this, but I'm gonna give it 5 stars anyway. So this, I described it to my family as basically the children's Bible version of Norse mythology. It is not a retelling, it is just sort of a rewriting of the original Norse mythology myths and tales that we have from the Prose Edda, which are, like, the only written accounts that we have of the Norse mythology beliefs and systems, and it takes some of those stories and just puts them in an easier to understand format and in English, which is very helpful for me because I cannot read Icelandic, which, fun fact, is basically identical to Old Norse, which is why we can still read the Prose Edda. But, like, I loved this story so much. I loved all these tales, I loved all these characters, all these gods and, like, myths, and it was so amazing. It was so amazing. It's just a collection of myths and tales from Norse mythology. You get to see Thor losing his hammer and having to pretend to be a bride to a giant, and Loki is his bridesmaid. You get to see all the antics. Like, where are my books? Okay, if you read anything from Magnus Chase, it's all the same tales. It's just, you get to see the children do it in this one. And in the Norse mythology, you get to see an easier, like, way to understand it in those books. So I, needless to say, fell in love with this. Again, 5 stars. It was amazing. I don't think I can rate this because it's obviously not original work. It's not even a retelling. It's just the same stories. Again, it's the children's Bible version of Norse mythology. I love it. So those are all the books I read this month. I know, kind of a lot of different stuff going on here, especially, like, with me and what's going on. Like, I do think my mental health did affect some of my ratings. I gave this month specifically Small Spaces, but I wasn't feeling it, and so I wasn't gonna read it because it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening, and I'm not gonna justify it anymore. It wasn't happening. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I kind of have an idea of what I'm gonna be reading in November. However, I'm not doing a set TBR because clearly I cannot stick to those. So if you have any recommendations on what you think I would like, or have any comments on what I've read, please leave that down in the comment section down below. While you're down there, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And as always, good night, good evening, and good morning, everybody.